Ari Rosenbaum here with another fun-filled episode of that 48K podcast. This week's topic, we're going to talk about um, a pro wrestling take on compliance for 401k plan sponsors. Yes, I did go there. But of course, first things first, go to that 401ksite.com. Further information on the virtual event at the end of January. Sign up, it's free. We should also have some dates readily available for Chicago. I think we're still. I did get something from Wrigley this week. Got to finalize whether we're going to be on I think the 16th or the 17th of April. Uh, we'll try it. I'm always wary of Chicago in April, but it'll be mid-April, so we'll see how that transpires. Um, and We should have dates on that. Denver, I think we're doing, and Philly. Hopefully, we can do Washington. We'll see what happens, but that won't be for another year. But Go to that 401ksite.com. We got all our articles. And of course, the landing page to sign up for that 4K National Virtual Conference at the end of January. Of course, Full Circle still available on Amazon.com and Kindle and paperback. So let's get to the topic at hand. Many years ago, I was working for the school paper, the Statesman. I was, for about a year or so, working at the paper twice a week, starting the paper at like 8 o'clock or 7 o'clock at night and not following up until 6 or 7 or 8 o'clock the next morning. That year working for the paper felt like 5 years. And I was managing editor, layout editor, opinion editor, whatever. And I had a column. I won the Martin Buskin Award at Stony Brook for Best Student Journalist. And I never took a journalism class in college. Funny how that happens. But we'd be there late at night, and we'd have space, and the best space to kill were house ads for the paper. So my buddy Tom and I, Tom was the sports editor, and I would do the layout, and Tom and I would just come up with these ads that only Tom and I would get. There'd be like, Tom and I went one time to an Aerosmith concert at Madison Square Garden. And in those days, in the 90s, being part of the Aerosmith fan club, you'd get access to like the best seats. And one time we were at Madison Square Garden, and for some inexplicable reason, I guess there was a guy in front of us standing on his chair, and just waving to somebody in the crowd. And we just thought it was so odd. So we'd put in an article, we'd put in a house ad, or like, Statesman Sports would be so good, you'll be standing on your seat waving to the crowd. And only Tom and I would get the joke. Of one of my former suite mates got hit in the head with a foul ball at a Stony Brook baseball game. And we heard the story, so, we'd put in an ad. It'd be like, Statesman Sports is so good, you'd think you got hit in the head with a foul ball. And, the point is that I would put these ads in just to amuse myself. And sometimes I will write these articles about, doing a weekly article, 52 weeks out of the year. Sometimes it's like 53 a year, basically, it's 364 days, whatever, 52 articles a year, and it's been going on for 15 years almost, or it's certainly been 15 years. That's a lot of articles. Like, how can you write that many articles about plan compliance and, plan provider stuff and get the same, and not run out of ideas? So sometimes I will write an article taking something that I really, really like and like putting it in there and making comparisons. Did one about Aerosmith a couple weeks ago. I did one. I'll never get one. The Force Awakens. I did one on Star Wars. The Godfather. I think I've done. So, I'll do something that just amuses myself. And this week's topic is going to be about professional wrestling and plan compliance issues. And, I just laugh about it. Of course, the joke that I only understand is um, being a sole proprietor and not having, different layers of partnership to approve the articles. If I was at that Fakakta law firm, they never would have approved something like this. It's like, what are you, why are you going there? And to me, one of the reasons I like articles is, yeah, it amuses myself, but it also, it takes, it's the Mary Poppins. A spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down. I believe that's Mary Poppins, right? Uh, you know, uh, Bringing these topics and talking about, uh, all these type of, I did an airplane article, and Airplane's my favorite movie. You're taking something so difficult, and then you're just like, you know, breaking it down into a topic that people can you know, be interested in. And professional wrestling is one of my interests for the last 40 some odd years. And I got into wrestling because, I went to Hebrew day school, and all the boys were into wrestling. So if they're into wrestling, then I'm going to get into wrestling. And I want to say that was like 1982, 83. Got hooked on it, and my parents were so judgmental. This is stupid. This is dumb. Blah blah blah. I remember they took me to my first live. I went to a card at the Canarsie High School gym, block and a half away, and then a few months later, I went to Madison Square Garden to see the Iron Sheik and fight Sergeant Slaughter in a boot camp match. It was my birthday, and we had like really high seats at the Garden. Um, and my parents just like crapped all over it. Like, this is the stupidest thing, and blah blah blah. It's funny. Both my grandfathers watched wrestling. They were big fans of Bruno, and I was able to meet Bruno Sammartino before he passed, and then tell them, how much it was a pleasure to meet him because I watched Bruno fight, and more importantly, there's that connection with my grandfathers who had passed on, and to me, professional wrestling is what always got me loving it was the comedy aspect of it. The Captain Lou Albano, Bobby Heenan type joking with it, where you don't take it seriously. And I knew from an early age that was not real. I mean, the John Stossel thing exposed the business, but even before then, you just knew it was not real, not on the up and up. And I always like, oh, well, it's fake. Well, yeah, I'm also a big fan of the, Dallas and the Bold and Beautiful, and that's fake too. Um, you know, I, I don't watch it as much anymore. I still follow it. I still follow the business aspects of it. One of my favorite stocks is TKO, um, and you know that's really it. It's just this strange you know interest in pro wrestling, and let's see how we can talk about plan sponsor compliance issues. And number one is the compliance booking sheet. Running a retirement plan. It's not like a barbed wire death match or Texas death match or a boot camp match. It's not supposed to be chaos. It's more like a WrestleMania event, carefully laid out, deliberate, and structured. The plan documented the script, and you need to follow it. You don't decide mid-match that you're going to change the finish because you think it may look better. For example, if your plan document says employer match contributions are made once a year, you can't just decide you want to switch to it every payroll. That's changing the booking sheet without clearing it with creative. The IRS doesn't care if you thought it would make the match more exciting. They care about operational compliance. Sponsors who ignore plain documents and interpret them loosely are like that indie wrestler who calls himself the franchise and wears a replica belt around the town. You know, and it's also important not to work stiff with the Department of Labor. Professional wrestling, working stiff means laying your shots in too hard, which can injure your opponent. The beauty of professional wrestling is that it's not supposed to hurt your competitor. One of my favorite wrestlers, Bret the Hitman Hart, was proud to say he never injured a wrestler, and unfortunately his career was ended by a sloppy kick by the wrestler Goldberg. But when it comes to the Department of Labor, working stiff is the last thing you want to do. If you're not following the fiduciary duties and the risks and decide that you know better, the Department of Labor is going to bring the heat, and they don't work safe. There's nothing worse than dealing with the Department of Labor audit and being discovered that you violated certain fiduciary duties, like uh, ignoring fee disclosures and charging unreasonable fees. Uh, you know, you might get away with it once, but eventually, you're going to get caught. Um, all you need is one person to go to the Department of Labor. But once there's a Department of Labor audit, you got to cooperate with the Department of Labor. You can't work stiff with them. You got to give them what they want. If you're just going to play games with them, they are going to lay the smackdown on you. It's important to tag team with your plan providers. You can't carry the whole match on your own. That's the beauty of a good tag team. You do your part, you let the plan providers do theirs, and together you get over with the crowd. The best plan sponsors know how to tag in the right partners. It could be TPAs, risk attorneys, investment advisors, record keepers, and you let them do their thing, and you let them do their thing, but you also watch what they do. But when sponsors go into business for themselves and try to micromanage the plan administration, or they ignore the advice of their service providers, uh, they're just basically refusing to tag out, and it ends up getting a bad double team finisher. You really never should be that guy. I've seen too many plan sponsors ignore advice, ignore my counsel because they didn't like the tone of the memo. They've ignored the daily reminders from the TPA because they're too busy. But at the end of the day, um, you have to team up with the best plan providers out there and take care of the big stuff like 5500s and plan documents and all that stuff. Next, botched spots and operational failures. It's something funny sometimes in wrestling when there's, it's very acrobatic. You got to hit everything correctly, and sometimes they're what we call botches. And I used to go to the greatest wrestling experience I ever had was going to Freeport with my cousin and watching ECW live, just the general house card. It was just entertaining because the crowd was entertaining, and if somebody missed the move and they botched it, the crowd would chant, "You effed up," and when I say effed, no, they use that word, and it was hilarious. Um, Operational compliance failures are like botches. You know, uh, if the plan says only eligible employees over age 21, only employees over age 21 are eligible, but you enrolled somebody who's 20, that's a botch. That's a miscued. That could, require a correction. Uh, Maybe you forgot to use the auto enrollment feature. Whatever it is, you can't forget your cue. You can't miss your finisher. You can't end the match with a count out. And, the Department of Labor, the IRS, doesn't really care for countouts. The problem is that sponsors don't often know they've blown the finish until months or years later. And that's a problem. Next, heels, faces, and fiduciary loyalty. In the wrestling world, there are heels, which are the bad guys, and faces that are good guys. The tweeners are the people who are in between. Stone Cold Steve Austin, I think, was effectively a tween, where he was a bad guy who the crowd got over because they just liked his attitude. He's one of my favorite wrestlers of all time. DTA, don't trust anybody. 1998, I spent 3 hours online to get his autograph. He was running late, and those were the days before cell phones. And I didn't tell my folks I was still online or whatever it was. And when I got home, the steak was cold. But that's what happens. You're supposed to, as a plan sponsor, you're supposed to act in the best interests of your participants. You're supposed to be the guy who never cheats, never takes shortcuts, and always fights for what's right. But the moment you stop, you start acting, in your own interest, hiring your buddy's RA firm or, reducing employer contributions without notice, you turn heel and fast. Auditors and regulators are going to ask for documentation and try to unwind the damage that you caused. Loyalty in the plan sponsor role isn't to the company, it's always to the plan participants. If you confuse that, you're in for a storyline that nobody truly wants. Um, you know, and you can't really go off script. Plan communications are the promos of the retirement plan world. You've got a microphone, which could be emails, participant notices, and SPD distributions, and you have to use it wisely. But I've seen too many plan sponsors cut shoot promos telling participants they can do things the plan doesn't allow, or promising benefits that don't exist. I recently saw like a email where somebody wanted an ERISA litigator dealing with a defined benefit plan where the union promised covered service, which the plan document did not. And I didn't want to get involved with it because, you know, you're not going to get it. But it's also important to make sure that plan sponsor doesn't, you know, go off script. That was an oral communication. If it's a written communication, this covered services, this service is covered. You may have an issue with the Department of Labor. But, you know, if you make a misstatement in writing, it's really hard to walk it back. You know, there have been, you know, issues with discrepancies between plain documents and SPDs, where you promise them a better benefit in the SPD, and you're going to have to provide it because that's the notice that you gave. You know, you got to stick to the approved script, which are the required notices and correct SPDs and all that stuff. You got to review your plan communication. Don't promise something that you can't deliver. That's just the nature of things. Every plan sponsor needs a gimmick, but not a work. A gimmick is fine. Maybe you pride yourself in offering a generous match or a slick ESG investment lineup. That's good branding, but don't work the participants. Don't pretend to be something you're not. If you tout yourself as the best-in-class fiduciary, then back it up. Conduct regular reviews, benchmark fees, review investment lineups, train your fiduciary committee, hold regular meetings, take minutes. Don't claim that you're the nature boy of plan sponsors when you're actually running a bingo ho show with one folding chair and the rest of the turnbuckle. It's important to learn from the veterans. You know, in wrestling, you're always taught to listen to the vets, the guys in the back who've been around, who've worked every territory, who've been in the business long enough to see the patterns. Same goes for plan sponsors. Talk to the TPA, listen to the ERISA attorney, take advice from people who've seen dozens of audits and thousands of plans. You don't need to reinvent the wheel when it's been done before. And, you know, speaking of vets, one of my favorite people that I did get to meet and go to a Tampa Bay Rays game was Jerry Briscoe. His brother Jack Briscoe was the NWA champion in the 1970s, and it was very funny talking to Jerry. Jerry was one of Vince McMahon's right-hand mans, and we're at the Rays game, and I was just bringing up all wrestling history and just getting his take on it. I still disagree with him about Montreal. I still don't think Bret Hart should have been screwed because Bret's one of my favorites. And the article that, you know, comes out with this podcast will be, you know, pictures of four of my favorite wrestlers: Ric Flair, Dusty Rhodes, Bret Hart, and Stone Cold. I'm proud to say I've met all four of them. Never got a chance to see Hogan, but it's just funny to, you know, you always got to listen to the veterans. They have that experience. The final bell, you got to stay over by staying in line. At the end of the day, being a successful plan sponsor isn't about trying to be the next Hulk Hogan of the benefits world. It's about consistency, humility, and teamwork. It's about working the plan the way it's written, not the way you wish it was. It's about putting the participants over every time. So if you're a plan sponsor thinking about going into business for yourself, don't. It might feel like a power move, but it all takes for one compliance misstep to get squashed in the first minute of the match, which always reminds me of WrestleMania 1, King Kong Bundy, Steve Jones. You know, they claimed it was 8 seconds, but if you watch that, there's no way that match is 8 seconds. It's more like 30 seconds. But you need to be the steady hands, be the locker room leader, and for the love of Gorilla Monsoon, don't shoot on your own plan. So, hope you enjoyed my take on professional wrestling as it relates to the 401k space and plan sponsor duties. It was an experiment. I enjoyed trying to fit that in, and back in law school, first year law school. I was never part of the in crowd in life, and I remember there was a certain group of students, and they would take bets or whatever dares, like how can you work a certain word into a classroom discussion, and guy by the name of Dave Rogers, who I think right now is still like some sort of Massachusetts state rep. Very interesting fellow. I never would anticipate he would be a politician. He was able to bring a discussion, I think it was in property class, about a ukulele. And, it was like, comparing something to the resonance of strumming a ukulele or something like that. And the class just started laughing. So I was able to take professional wrestling and get it into terms for plane compliance issues. I know that I can never get a ukulele in there. But maybe I'll try, in the next 15 years. I hope you enjoyed this episode of that 401k podcast. Don't forget, we got that national virtual conference at the end of January. Go to that 401ksite.com. It's free. Go to amazon.com, Kindle, paperback, Full Circle. And the next book should be out in January. I think it's going to be called That 401k Plan Provider Book. Originally, I was going to do just marketing stuff, but, I also have like hiring issues and stuff that, just my 2 cents on a lot of things if you're a 401k plan provider. So tune in next week for another fun-filled episode of that 401k podcast. Take care.